And truthfully, when I was asked to preach for this Young Adult Sabbath, I kind of struggled on coming up with what I would talk about. I probably sat for about 2 months saying, I'm going to put this sermon together, and just nothing came to mind. But with thought and prayer, I finally had something come to mind, and I think it's going to be inspired by God for you this morning. So today I titled my sermon, A Desensitized Nation. Now, desensitized. What does that mean? According to the Webster's Dictionary, it arranges from a verb saying desensitize, which means to make a sensitive or hypersensitive individual insensitive to a non-reactive to a sensitizing agent, which is just a bunch of words when I read it the first time. So, to sum it up a bit, it means to extinguish the emotional response of fear, anxiety, or guilt to a stimuli or stimulus like a person, an event, a situation that previously induced it. So I want to ask you a question. Are we desensitized today? Are we as individuals desensitized? What about as a church? Has Christianity become desensitized? It's a good question, and depending on who you ask, you'll probably get a different answer. I believe that Christianity as a whole has begun to become desensitized. Now, some would argue that we are evolving towards this social equality. But my hope for this sermon is that by the end, you can ask yourself truly, are you becoming desensitized as well? Or are you fighting for God's character and law? So I want to start my sermon off by looking at Abraham. And specifically, I want to go to when God tells Abraham of his plan to destroy the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we're going to go to Genesis chapter 18, and we're going to go start in verse 17. And I do have the scriptures up here on the slides as well. But 17 to 21 says, "Then the Lord said, 'Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised for him.' Then the Lord said, 'The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know.'" Now, if we were to keep reading on, you'd know the story. But to summarize, Abraham continues to plead with God, asking him to save the people in the city. And he goes about X amount of righteous people. So first he starts with 50 people, and then he goes down to 45, then 40, then 30, then 20, and then finally 10. And that's where he ends, 10 people. And reading the story fully through, it pondered on me. Abraham has quite the reduction of righteous people from 50 all the way down to 10. I mean, mathematically, that's like an 80% decrease. Now, while I was in university, I took a business negotiation class, and I'm not sure if any of you have ever negotiated before. But when negotiating, do you start with your best case scenario or your worst case scenario? Exactly. Well, no. For example, let's say you wanted to sell your house. Do you list your house for the lowest price that you want to accept? Or where do you start? You start with your highest price, and you hope that you will end up somewhere in the middle. So if we go back to Abraham's negotiation with God, he started with 50 people and ended with 10. So what does this say about Abraham's opinion of the people around him? If Abraham was using negotiation tactics, and I like to think that Abraham was a smart man, did Abraham think the city was full of righteous, Christ-minded people? If Abraham only thought 10 could be possibly righteous, we could assume that Abraham was surrounded by mostly ungodly individuals. In fact, the Bible states there were many different nations with various religions and demographics around Abraham in Genesis 15, verse 18 to 20. And it reads, "On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, 'To your descendants I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates.'" And I apologize if I mess up some of these pronunciations of these nations. But the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So we can establish that Abraham had all these kingdoms in the surrounding area, all that could influence him. But with all these different religions, these different demographics, these different nations, did Abraham go around mingling with everyone, learning their ways, adapting their beliefs, and picking which cultures he liked best? No. Abraham was actually told to be careful about intermingling with those around him. And this special set of instructions of being careful to intermingling is not a unique topic in the Bible. In fact, the Israelites were also told to be careful with intermingling with the nations around them. So why does God caution people and nations on intermingling? To answer this, let's go back to Genesis 18, and we're going to go back to verse 23. And this is where we first see Abraham ask God about sweeping away the city. And it reads, "Then Abraham approached him and said, 'Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?'" Now, there's a specific reason I wanted to read this verse. What two groups did Abraham categorize people into when pleading to God? Yes. Abraham put the people of Sodom and Gomorrah into two categories. We had the righteous and the wicked. See, Abraham saw people in only two different ways: those who were righteous, or those who were following God's example, and those who were wicked, or those who did not follow God's example. So if Abraham saw people this way, we should ask ourselves, does God also see people this way? If we look at Abraham's plea with God, did God ever once correct Abraham for calling the people righteous or wicked? He did not. So if God didn't correct Abraham for categorizing people as wicked or righteous, can we assume that God also sees people as wicked and righteous? Christ Objects Lessons, page 180, paragraph 2, kind of talks about this, and it says, "There are only two classes in the world today, and only two classes will be recognized in the judgment: those who violate God's law, the wicked, and those who obey it, the righteous. Christ gives the test by which to prove our loyalty or disloyalty. 'If ye love me,' he says, 'keep my commandments. He that hath my commandments and keepeth them, he is that loveth me.'" So not only does Abraham divide us into two groups, but God himself also sees us in two different ways. There's those who obey him, righteous, and those who do not, the wicked. And this is exactly why God cautioned people like Abraham and Israelites against intermingling with those around them. Have you ever heard the saying, "You are what you eat"? What does that mean? Let me give you an example. If you ate McDonald's every day, are you going to look healthy and in shape? Probably not. Why? Because McDonald's is unhealthy, and you will eventually begin to look unhealthy. The same is in our spiritual life. It was the same for Abraham, it's the same for the Israelites, and it's the same for us. What we put into our life, we will eventually become. See, there's no middle fence. There's no split custody of God's day and our day. There's no split of his law and the world's law, following different ones of what we choose. There's no just following him and not following him, choosing how we want to. Abraham didn't plea with God saying, "You know, God, there's 50, 30, or maybe 10 people, but if they're only righteous, Friday through Sunday, will you save the city?"